Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, November 4th, 2022. It is 5:42 a.m. Eastern Time, Eastern Daylight Time. Uh, it is quite early in the morning. I just want to say this is around 5:43 in the morning. So, yeah. So today is actually day one of a today, if you guys did not know, QP workers have now walked off the job. Talks have now broke down. We weren't able to get an agreement, but there was talks have now broke down between the mediator and QP. So as a result of that, the workers are now on strike. So yeah. We might actually go walk down and see if I can get some photos of picklines for you guys. So yeah, this is a big deal because for a lot of people because we have not had a problem with this in years. So today we're doing this day. We're now on day one. So what I'm doing this is I'm going to be doing these every day, starting now until the strike concludes, and then we'll be back to weekly update. So yeah, we've been documenting this for most of this time up until this point. And we're gonna start around September 12th and do another update there. But yeah. Well, what I did this morning was we woke up. I went outside. It's still foggy outside actually. So I actually went out for a walk around. I disinfected compose around Pickering, but during the height of the fog. So yeah, just want to make a little quick update to you guys to let everybody know what's going on. There will be no school today. I don't know. I have not even received an email yet from the board. Apparently, we will get more information in the morning. I don't know. I'll probably show it to you guys in tomorrow's update. So will be Saturday, November 5th. So yeah. We're very unfortunate that we won't be in school today, so I'll be at home for most of the day. But apparently they're saying that we will be doing an asynchronous learning today. Asynchronous learning starting Monday. So yeah, so really this will be the only way I'll be able to communicate with everybody looking through the YouTube channel. So we'll wait to communicate to everybody. So this is a very big deal, guys. So I want to say I'm gonna be hopping off soon. This is I just want to give everybody a short quick update. Today is day one of the strike. Let me show you guys the news. So what has happened over the last day. Find the articles here. Uh, let me show you guys. We actually made some video. We've actually been doing live streams on these topics all week.
And breaking news from Queen's Park, where MPPs are voting on the Keep Students in Class Act. Let's listen in live. Miss Tangent, Mr. Pizzetta, Miss Scott, Mr. Bailey, Miss Barr, Mr. Cook, Miss Triantine,
Wow.
Mr. Cook,
Mr. Coe.
Miss Martin.
Ms. Martin.
Mr. Crawford.
Mr. Crawford.
Mr. Yakabuski.
Mr. Yakabuski.
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Holland.
Miss Kusendova.
Mr. Novodaska.
Mr. Kanagasi.
Mr. Kanagasi.
Miss Dixon.
Ms. Dixon.
Miss McLeod.
Ms. McCoy.
Mr. Hardiman.
Mr. Hardiman.
Mrs. Tangus.
Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Zarazan.
Mr. Sarah.
Mrs. Sabal.
Mr. Savannah.
Mr. Leon.
Mr. Leon.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Clark.
Miss Smith Thornhill.
Ms. Smith Thornhill.
Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Penn.
Mr. Penn.
Mr. Byers.
Mr. Bond.
Mr. Oster.
Roscoe.
Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Jordan.
Miss Spear.
Ms. Pierre.
Mrs. White.
Mrs. White.
Mr. Anand.
Mr. Anand.
Mr. Sanderson.
Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Sanders.
Mr. Sanders.
Mr. Smith, Peter Beaufort.
Mr. Smith. Peterborough Court.
Mr. Bauman.
Mr. Bellman.
Mr. Kanapati.
Kanapati.
Mrs. Lamar.
Mrs. Moore.
Mr. Badikio.
Mr. Madikio.
Mr. Jones, Chatham Cantlini.
Jones Shannon.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr.
Hey,
Allen.
yes,
Mr. Riddell. Mr. McGregor.
Mr. Dowell.
Mr. Dowers.
Mr. Smith, Scarborough Center.
Mr. Smith. Scarborough Center.
Mr. Greenwald.
Mr. Greenwald.
Mr. Red.
Mr. Ross.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise one at a time and be recognized by the clerk.
Take the page rolling now.
Mr. Van Hoff.
Mr. Van Hoff.
Ms. Sattler.
Mr. Sattler.
MPP Pavel.
Mr. P. Tanner.
Mrs. Baker.
Mr. Craig.
Mr. Mama.
Mr. Monaco.
MPP Bell.
Mr. P. Bell.
Ms. Flynn.
Ms. Frank.
Ms. Armstrong.
Ms. Armstrong.
Deputy Minister.
Deputy Malcolm.
Ms. French.
Ms. French.
MPP Stiles.
MPP Style.
MPP Turner.
MPP Turnbull.
MPP West.
MPP West.
MPP Stevens.
MPP Stevens.
I believe it really had to come to the
MPP Anderson.
backwards.
Mr. Coach.
Mr. Burke.
Mr. Burke.
MPP Glover.
MPP Glover.
MPP Wong Cat.
MPP Wongtown.
Mr. Lakota.
Mr. Rakosa.
MPP Harding.
MPP Hart.
MPP Bourgeois.
MPP Bourgeois.
Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Fraser.
Ms. Hunter.
Ms. Hunter.
Mr. Schreiner.
Mr. Shrine.
Ms. Brady.
Ms. Brady.
Ms. Coleman.
Coleman.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Sue.
Mr. Daniel.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Smith.
Ms. McMahon.
Oh, now I know where it's But they are now on strike officially as of today. In fact, we were up here early morning and we went around town.
The ayes are 74, the nays are 34.
The ayes being 74, the nays being 30, I declare the motion carried. Be it resolved that the bill do now pass as entitled in the motion. Orders of the day.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we will, of course, be canceling night sittings this evening. At the same time, Madam Speaker, I'm sure if you seek it, you'll
We've
find
been
unanimous consent
listening
to
into
Department
Queen's Park, where we watched it live and heard it live, where the passing of the Keep Students in Class Act was passed by a 74 to 30 margin, legislating a contract for CUPE education workers, making the planned strike tomorrow illegal. Protesters gathered outside the Sheraton Center this evening to show their support for education.
I said, this is a lot crazy, guys. Like, looks like we will not be going to school today. And in fact, we're not going to be going for quite a while. In fact, this is the earliest morning that we have ever been. This also opposed. Yeah, also are now
Workers who are walking off the job. For more on that and tomorrow's planned political protest, CP24's Christina Tenalia joins us live with more. Christina.
Way more fun.
And that's what the union's calling it now. The Ontario School Board Council of Unions said tonight in a tweet that it is a political protest, and that will take place along with not only this political protest, but some groups that are also unions, other groups that will show up to show their solidarity here at Queen's Park. The Toronto Police have already put out a tweet saying that people can expect a traffic disruption around the area of Queen's Park downtown, beginning at 8 a.m. tomorrow until about 4 p.m. So this afternoon, when the legislation passed, Bill 48. A lot of bills here, but this was Bill 48. It now it is law. It imposes a 4-year contract on CUPE's 55,000 education workers, and as part of that,
we could be in for this being the longest strike in the education system history. So I don't even expect being back in school for quite a long time. It could be quite a while before this could be a while before I'm back. I don't know if I'm going back for a while. Contract is way too far apart. That I think it was quite early. So that's 70. Now 72 or 71%.
there are fines included in this legislation. So what the legislation states is that these education workers who will take part in this political protest tomorrow can be fined, the union itself, up to $500,000 per day. Each individual member, $4,000 per member per day. The instruction from the union to its workers is show up on a picket line tomorrow. Picket lines will be at MPP's offices or other government offices, including, frankly, here at Queen's Park. This is the sort of government facility, the institution of the government here tomorrow. Here's more from some of those that came to this rally outside the Sheraton Hotel that we spoke with earlier.
The TDSB, who I work for, they did the right thing in shutting down the schools. We can't function without education workers, not at all. It's not safe, it's not effective.
You can take a look at every single person here. We're here because we know who's fighting for our kids, and it's the workers at CUPE who are fighting for more.
Keep in mind, guys, really only day one. We pretty much be out for quite a long time, so we are going to be out. I really say forget about even considering going back to school for a very long time. Schools are closed. I was up there earlier a little while about
Adults in the building, more resources and more support for our kids. Those are the people standing up for our kids. Ford and Lecce are attacking them. They're attacking our kids.
So, Scott, I spoke with an employment lawyer earlier tonight who said those fines that I mentioned are the intention is that they're supposed to discourage and.
Oh my! Like that, camera. More. They're actually quite bad.
I'd say maybe 4 to 6 hours worth of rain. If we're done with it, we're clearing the skies back out for Sunday. Sunday, by the way, sunny at 18 degrees. Along with that rain on Saturday comes
illegal strike. There's supposed to be a deterrent, and certainly her opinion, she's an employment lawyer, is that it would be unlikely that the government moves forward with $4,000 fines for each of CUPE's 55,000 education workers. But that is listed in the legislation. The government does have a right to do that. If they impose the maximum fine on CUPE and its members for tomorrow, that would add up to more than $220 million. So these political protests will move forward tomorrow. tomorrow. You can expect them outside MPP's offices and government offices in your neighborhoods and in your communities. Back to you.
Christina Tenalia reporting live at Queen's Park tonight. Christina, thank you. And let's go live to CP24's Christina Tenalia outside the Sheraton Center, where the rally in support of QP education workers is underway. Christina.
Yes, Scott. So education workers gathered here, teachers and parents came to show their support. And I want to point out that no one was obligated to be here. It was wrapping up. Sorry, it is wrapping up is what I meant to say. This rally was underway for a good chunk of the last hour and a bit. No one was obligated to be here because tomorrow education workers are required, as per their union, QP, to hit the picket line. But those that came here today came to have their voices heard. So I'm going to break down some of the legalities and questions that many have around what has been going on. So I want to introduce Simone Otrowski, partner with Whitten and Lublin Employment Lawyers, and of course an employment lawyer herself. Simone, thank you so much for joining us here in the middle of this rally. So I appreciate it. To start, I want to remind our viewers that Bill 28 has passed. This is the legislation that imposes a 4-year contract on education workers. It has received royal assent. It is now law. Simone, what legal authority does the government have to impose a 4-year contract on education workers? And what's the point of collective bargaining?
For, I said, between 4 and 5 and 5 in the morning. Between 4 and 5 in the morning.
And that camaraderie is what these Jeep girls say gives the group traction. It's super empowering, and it's
8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 11:45 a.m. So we have 55. I like so we'll be in sites where we have PP options. So we'll be doing that like later. Turn off my mic here.
If the government's going to step in and say, we're throwing this contract on you and you have no choice?
That's a good question, Christine. Thanks for having me. Historically, I believe the goal is for the government, of course, and the unions to come to a negotiated agreement without the need for the government to have to impose legislation forcing the workers to work. And of course, unfortunately, we've seen situations in the past where the government has said to the unions, unfortunately, we're passing a bill, you cannot strike, you have to go back to work, and we're forcing you. It's usually come after a period of protracted negotiation that doesn't result in a deal. It's usually a last resort. And of course, the union, if they feel that the bill forcing them back to work has been unfair or violates their constitutional right to collectively bargain or to picket, then they can sue the government. They can bring litigation against the government in court for violation of their constitutional rights. And we have seen that litigation be successful for the unions, and they've actually received damages from the government when a court has sided with the union and said the government took away the union's rights to meaningfully collectively bargain.
And Simone, what you're referring to is 10 years ago. This was a battle between, at the time, the Ontario Liberal McGuinty government and ETFO, ETFO being a teachers union, not education workers. And the government had to pay the teachers back more than $100 million. So is this something you could foresee CUPE pursuing? I mean, is that a lot for the government? Like, that's a huge sum of money.
For sure, it's definitely a large sum of money, and it's meant to be a deterrent for governments in terms of not violating Canadians' constitutional rights. It has to be a large financial penalty, the theory goes, in order for governments to be dissuaded from instituting unconstitutional laws in the first place. But what's different is with this Bill 28, the government has invoked the notwithstanding clause in the Constitution that basically allows the government constitutional rights.
Simone, sorry, I may have lost you there for a moment. I wanted to ask you about the notwithstanding clause. In your opinion, as an employment and labor lawyer, was this a suitable use of the notwithstanding clause? Because what we're hearing from constitutional law experts is this is not what it was intended to be used for as part of the Constitution.
Yes, that's a good question. I can't say what it was intended to be used for, whether it's a good use. I can say it's definitely unprecedented. It's definitely a novel use of the clause. And what's interesting is that it could take away CUPE's right to bring litigation against the government related to this bill, because previously a union could sue the government for an unconstitutional bill. But if the bill removes the union's right to bring constitutional challenge, then there's no lawsuit. There's no means to bring litigation against the government. So it'll be interesting to see what remedies, if any, CUPE has. They've certainly been left with very little recourse, in my view, from a legal perspective related to this bill.
Okay, and my final question here, Simone, is the legislation which passed just before the dinner hour, included in it, is that, well, it's quite clear these education workers will hit the picket line tomorrow. The government is quite clear, as per the litigation, this is an illegal strike. They could fine CUPE, the national union, $500,000 per day. They could fine each individual member, there's 55,000 of them, $4,000 per member per day, just for tomorrow. If the government moved forward with the maximum fines, that's more than $220 million. In your opinion, how likely is this? And of course, even from a logistical perspective, could you imagine thousands of people showing up to court with a fine to fight? It seems for the court system, this would be a logistical nightmare and unlikely, but you're the expert, so you let us know.
That's a good question. I would have a hard time believing that the government isn't going to, in fact, impose fines on every single one of these workers, and of course on the union as a whole. There could be issues, of course, with double recovery there if you're fining each individual member, and then of course the union as an entity. My understanding is that these fines are meant to be more of a discouragement. They're trying to prevent illegal strikes from happening. Each day, of course, the fines increase. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of a deal. The government doesn't impose the fines in exchange for hopefully the workers going back to work sooner. But you're right, it's a lot of workers to issue fines against, and certainly would take a long time to process and see any sort of actual recovery.
Okay, Simone, we appreciate your time and sharing your expertise with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, on that note, this rally's wrapping up, but education workers will be on picket lines outside MPP's offices and government offices tomorrow. Back to you.
Christina Tonali reporting live tonight. Christina, thank you. We continue to follow breaking news out of Queen's Park at this hour, where Bill 28 has just passed. Let's go back live. CP24's Eden Abebe with the very latest. Eden.
It was a heated moment when the vote was announced. We saw QP members in the visitors gallery shouting shame. We saw Conservative MPP's reaction, as well as NDP and Liberal MPPs. I'm actually joined by one today, MPP Mitzi Hunter. Tell me about your thoughts and emotions after seeing that vote go through.
It was very emotional. First of all, the protest that was happening as the vote was being counted is a demonstration of democracy. It's, you know, it was a sad moment for all of us here in the chamber who disagree with the government's bully bill of legislating education workers, and their representatives and others from the labor union was here to really say that they don't agree with this. But the vote continued because that is required, and the government used its majority to slam this hammer of legislating using the notwithstanding clause for those workers, putting them in a position that if they walk off the job tomorrow, that it would be an illegal strike that will be very costly. It's an abuse of power and heavy-handed and was not needed.
And let's talk a little bit about the Conservative MPP's reactions to QP's demonstration. We saw some pointing, we saw some people quiet, some laughing. What are your emotions seeing that?
They're trivializing it. They're trivializing the charter, the highest law of our land, embedded in the Constitution. And today they took away those rights of those workers. Their human rights were suspended. Their Ontario Labour Relations rights were suspended, all because they were following the Education Act and giving the government notice that should they not reach agreement, they will withdraw services. They didn't say when they would do that. They didn't say how they would do that. And the government put forward this preemptive bully bill to silence them and to sanction them $4,000 a day for those members. That's 10% of their annual salary. It's just egregious.
And very quickly here, what are the next steps? I think that's what on parents and everyone's minds right now. What is your next steps as an MPP?
Yeah, well, we really, don't have many options here in our provincial legislature because the government used its majority to invoke the notwithstanding clause to pass this very aggressive piece of legislation. Maybe at this point we have to look to the federal government to disallow this bill, given the fact that it is using the notwithstanding clause in a way that it was never intended for its use. It's actually trivializing our highest law of our land and diminishing the rights of all Canadians by using it in this way.
Mitzi Hunter, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, share your thoughts on this vote passing. Now, again, the next steps will remain to be seen. We don't really know what's going to happen next. CUPE saying they will strike regardless. The Ford government saying they will do everything in their power, use every tool, was the quote that they used to make sure that schools stay open. Sending it back to you, Scott and Lindsay.
Okay, thanks, Eden. And CUPE is updating us. Let's listen in.
I'm going to start out by saying, if this government had spent as much time at the bargaining table and working as hard there as they have in crafting a bill that has clearly been in place since bargaining began, we wouldn't be in this situation. To hear today that the minister is concerned about people not being able to eat, children not being able to eat, is a smack in the face to the quarter of my members that are already at food banks because they cannot afford to live in this province and do the work that they love.
The minister has made it clear he's going to fine your members $4,000 a day. Are you going to pay for that as the union? How's that going to work?
The fines can come and we will look after it. But how ridiculous is it that this minister is so concerned about pulling more money out of people who are impoverished instead of just sitting down and listening to what they need?
This will be an illegal strike, though. This is an illegal strike.
That's the great part about being part of a union and being part of the labor movement.
That's $1 billion in a week.
We understand that. We understand that.
Where's the money coming from?
That will be determined as we move forward. I can tell you right now that there is money coming in from other sources, including parents who are donating the $200 that they got from this government into the strike fund.
But this isn't sustainable for long, Laura.
You know what? At this point, there's a bigger problem on the horizon, and that is the mass exodus of education workers who can no longer afford to do the work that they love. You cannot fill a gas tank with passion. You need money, and you also need services coming in. We don't have enough EAs. We don't have enough custodians. There are schools being cleaned every other day, and there's nothing in this legislation that is going to happen that's going to make that any better. And that's the unfortunate part.
Laura, you are looking to make a point. Is a one-day strike not a point enough?
This was never about a point. This was about getting workers what they need in order to survive. Unfortunately, this government decided to use their sledgehammer to put in a pushpin. There's no need to use a notwithstanding clause. There is no need to rip away someone's charter rights or human rights. What they have done is awaken a labor giant.
So what happened yesterday, though?
Government held letters or basic for any kind of intervention. Do you feel like that's necessary because working on something like that?
Well, the Prime Minister thinks it's necessary. He said very plainly that the use of the notwithstanding clause in this instance is wrong, unequivocally. And Jagmeet Singh put forward a motion to have a special debate here. Everyone across the country, we were just on a call with our National Executive Board. Folks are talking about this across the country from coast to coast to coast, because beyond what is happening here in relation to the important work our members do in schools, the Ford Conservatives are doing something that is unprecedented in Canadian labor history. It is just not okay for them to think that they can take the nuclear approach to collective bargaining. That impacts, yes, our members in schools, but it impacts every public sector worker, every private sector worker. This is about trade union rights. This is about workers' rights. And that is why you are seeing growing support across the province. They don't know what they have started here.
Laura, what happened at the bargaining table? You had a proposal yesterday. It was rejected. Why did the mediator break off the talks?
Because there is very clear that this government doesn't want to move. This government was looking to find a bargain basement deal that didn't respect students, that didn't respect workers, that didn't respect families. And so they're going to legislate it. You can't talk to four walls. You need to have some give and take. And at a time when inflation is at 7%, to say, please, lowest paid in the province when it comes to education workers, please take pennies. If they think that that is going to be acceptable, it just won't. And you know what? I hope that people understand that there are clearly so many people behind us. And quite frankly, let's be clear, workers are parents. I'm a parent, and I am disgusted by the government that we have in Ontario now, trying to be divisive, hearing that they're worrying about working moms. I am a working mom. We need to put food on the table too. The only people that are fighting for kids in this province are the workers, not this government.
Did you guys calculate though? Did you come in too high at 11%?
No, we did
You
not.
don't think that that was too tough a stance?
Can you talk about what you were asking for now that talks are not continuing?
Yes. We moved away from our 325. We moved a substantial amount, over half, to see if that would be, because we hear the minister talking all the time about his inflated percentages. We moved to see, hey, listen, if we drop it substantially, are you going to move? Not an inch. Not an inch. As a matter of fact, the minister told you today that our sick leave is secure. It is not. He said that he came to us with generous increases. No, he did not. As a matter of fact, if you read the legislation and compare it to the current collective agreement that is now gone, he has once again stripped away from the very workers that he told had to report to work during the pandemic. So no, we tried everything. We moved as much as our members could possibly.
Wow. Well, I hope it doesn't last for very long, the strike.
We don't know for sure, but it could be a month. It could be a couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, well, let's hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I hope you have a good day, Dylan, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have a good day with the granddaughter.
Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah.
Okay, you take care.
All right.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Possibly move, and understanding that they have bills to pay. And this minister, through his mediaries, said not enough. He has never wanted to negotiate. This government had this bill ready when we served notice 150 days ago. And so today I will be in the House when this happens, because he can look me in the eye as he strips away the rights of workers, as he strips away the rights of women who are fighting and doing 2 and 3 jobs. We don't have the luxury to not fight, because we are so desperate already. He's backed us in a corner. We're coming out swinging, and we're bringing the labor movement with us.
Laura, how does all this end? You said yesterday it would continue until further notice, until a deal is reached. Once the legislation passes today, that's a deal. It's not a negotiated deal, but the contract will be in place. So how does this strike end?
What is going in place today is a piece of legislation. It is not a deal. A deal is something that 2 parties come to collectively and agree to. What this is a bullying tactic. What this is an imposition. But make no mistake, it is not a collective or an agreement.
So are you going to keep striking until they come back to a table that's no longer there?
We invite them to come back to the table at any time. As a matter of fact, how many times did the minister tell you bargaining was off and we were still there bargaining? There has been a clear problem with this minister, his negotiations tactics or lack thereof, and he is going to cause chaos in the province. He caused chaos in the province in the last 2 years by failing to put in place the funding that would have kept all of our children safe. We were there. We know. We saw it. We know that emergency rooms right now for children are at a peak. And this government is more worried about stripping away your rights because let's be clear, this is not about just education workers. They will come after each and every single one of us to achieve what they want, which is the complete and utter privatization of this province. And I am so proud that I'm part of a union that is standing up and saying no.
Will you
But you're not
pay
saying
the
how it's
fines?
going to end, though, Laura. You're not telling
Because
us.
our members are going to decide how it's going to end. The people of the province are going to decide how it's going to end. The growing number of people who are joining us every day. Look, the OFL called a rally with 24 hours notice and 5,000 people showed up. We're getting all kinds of notices every day. Our office has been flooded with calls. You know what they are? They're parents and everyday community members saying, how can we help? How can we support you? We're on side with you. I did a media interview earlier today. The tech guy who was checking my sound said, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I should let you know that my whole family's been calling the minister and complaining. So they don't know what they have begun here. And if they think they can just continue to trample on workers' rights, these are workers who for the last 10 years have had their rights trampled on with Bill 115 and Bill 124. Working people have had enough. Enough is enough. And so
Are you on strike indefinitely? Please answer the question.
yes,
We are on strike.
until our members decide
We are on
otherwise.
strike. We are on strike until this government recognizes that you can put in all of the legislation in place, but you cannot control a worker movement that is so fed up with your overreach. I actually call on Doug Ford to come and talk to me. Stop talking to the media. Don't send Mr. Lecce. Come and speak to me. Let him hear from my members like Charity, who on a call today had to explain to us that she goes to the food bank every Friday to make sure her kids have food. This government's not looking after her. Do you know who's looking after her? The union.
Will you refuse to pay the fines?
We will take the fines and we will proceed and
you
we will
pay
fight them
And we'll
every
fight
step.
them.
We
We'll
will fight
fight
them.
So you're not going to pay them initially?
Look, do you think it makes no sense at all for them to be targeting women
But
who are low paid in the province?
I
It makes no
understand,
sense to
Fred,
them at
but
all.
Will you refuse? Can you refuse to pay the fines, and what would the consequences
I don't know.
be?
People have been asking, can you go on strike when it's not illegal to strike? The right to strike was not given to workers. Workers decided it and workers took it. That's what our members are doing on Friday. They are deciding to stand up for themselves and we will fight then and we will fight against fines and we will continue to fight until we get what is needed in our province.
I'm going to have Candace actually come and speak about the fine.
I'm the National Secretary Treasurer of CUPE, responsible for finance and operations at our national union. And I think our message is clear that we are not prepared to allow this government to use extraordinary bullying tactics and the threats of fining our members to prevent them from taking the job action that they want and for standing up for their rights. So we are giving our members clear instructions. If you are fined on the picket line, you report that fine to your president and you let the union know, and we will provide you with further instructions. We are in the process of seeking legal support on that. If the government of Ontario wants to clog up the justice system with $4,000 per member per day fines, then I say bring it on. We are ready for that fight, and we're going to decide what kind of a union we want to be. And I think you can see our members in the school board sector leading the way.
But the fine is against the union is
And we are-
$500,000 a day.
and
Will
we-
the union pay that fine?
We will fight that. And if we have to pay it, we are prepared to pay that. But we're going to fight it, and we're going to resist it, and we're going to stand up for our rights. And if at the end of the day our union has to pay it, we will find the money and pay it.
So your message to parents, if the strike continues the next week, that, they're not listening to labor talks, all they care about is my kids aren't going to school. What are you going to say to the parents?
Same thing I say in the mirror because I am a parent. We are fighting for the services that your kid needs. Just because your children are housed in a school does not mean that those kids are getting those services. I can tell you that firsthand. They are not getting the services that they need. And we are going to continue to fight because it is not okay that there is a mom in Toronto that has to sit out in front of a school in Toronto Catholic District School Board because there's not an EA who can support the toileting and personal care of her daughter. That's not okay. And there's nothing in this legislation that is going to help that mom or that daughter seek her independence. And that's what parents need to be doing. They need to be looking and asking yourself, why is this government fighting so hard to prevent the services that kids need from coming in? Why is that? Why are they fighting so hard to keep the most impoverished further in poverty? And quite frankly, fining us $400, fining $4,000, $500,000, it's kind of like a bully asking for your school money, your lunch money every day. At one point, you're going to have to stand up to that bully and say enough is enough. And we have 55,000 people, along with so many of our friends across this country, who are saying no more. And quite frankly, that's what we teach kids in school, right? To stand up to the bullies, not be a bystander. And I'm now calling on everyone in the province. You don't need to be a bystander and watch this government bully. You can stand up and you can say no. Because quite frankly, what they do to me, they're going to do to you. And I will be there fighting for you every step of the way. Thank you.
Parents need to know, right? They need to make plans. So they'll be making plans for next week for their kids?
I would make plans. Definitely, I would make plans. As a matter of fact, you know, when my kids were little, I had plans for a snow day. I had plans for, you know, any sort of thing. Our schools are in disrepair. You should see how many times that, you know, there's no hydro in our schools. And so they don't have a day that they can go to school that day either. Parents have contingency plans. Always have contingency plans. I understand as a mom, this is hard. Trust me, my son is not happy either. He has a big football game tomorrow. It's not going to be happening. But you know what he said to me? Mom, if you don't fight now, how is anyone going to do your job later? I am fighting so that every single worker can do my job after me. And we're not going to stop just because of this minister. Thank you.
We should go up to the debate. Yeah. Thank you.
UP leaders are speaking after talks between the province and the union ended without compromise, and you heard it from them. The strike is going to go on indefinitely, and they asked parents to make plans for next week, which means that the strike could go beyond tomorrow. Now to breaking news. Talks between the province and the union representing tens of thousands of education workers have ended. CUPE accuses the government of failing to even try to negotiate a deal, and Education Minister Stephen Lecce says that there would be no talks until the union withdrew the threat of a strike.
This is not a normal time in society. Kids are in a different place. This is not the 90s under the Ray government when there were local strikes, or the Harris government, or the McGuinty government when there were strikes there too. This is a different time. And I would argue most parents would accept the premise. This is an unprecedented challenge on children. And they're seeing the regression in their children's social, emotional, physical, and mental health. And on that basis, we feel strongly that we must do everything available to government to give a voice to children.
Meanwhile, the opposition weighed in on the end of the negotiations.
The minister can try to weasel out of responsibility for this all that he wants, but parents know, education workers know, this is on the minister and this is on the premier. The government had so many other options. They have spent months drafting this legislation instead of negotiating a fair deal at the table. They refused to come to the table this week, displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of how labor relations work.
CUPE and its members are following the Act, the Education Act, in terms of steps to bargaining. The minister is the one that has leapfrogged that process with a preemptive move with this bully bill 28. And it is this minister and the Ford government that is accountable and responsible for what is about to happen.
The Canadian Civil Liberties Association is calling for an end to the notwithstanding clause.
I think that many people didn't give much thought until now to the notwithstanding clause because it was not in use, because it was not supposed to be in use, and it was certainly never intended to be used to violate human rights, to violate fundamental rights and freedoms that are so valuable to each of us. But I think that now, as people are waking up to the reality of its use and what it means, I think more and more will be concerned, because most people in this country care very deeply about human rights. When they put a little maple leaf on their backpack, that means something. And that something includes decency, It includes equality. It includes freedoms.
The TDSB has confirmed all of its schools will be closed for in-person learning for the duration of the strike starting on Friday. And here is the latest of school boards that say that they will shut down in the event of job action, which we now know is going ahead. Public and Catholic boards in Toronto, Durham, York will be closed, as well as the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board. Meanwhile, the Peel Board says that it would have students log in online and participate in asynchronous learning with teachers and support staff, which will be available remotely. For a complete list, you can go to cp24.com.
Let's head back to Queen's Park, where the opposition is reacting.
They have spent months drafting this legislation instead of negotiating a fair deal at the table. They refused to come to the table this week, displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of how labor relations work. CUPE offered a counter-proposal this week. The government rejected it. The government could have turned to binding arbitration. They refused that option. They still have 12 hours to go where they could be at the table, and instead the government has walked away. The minister wanted this, the minister is getting this, and thanks to the minister, my kids are going to be home tomorrow, and many of your kids are going to be home tomorrow. It is the minister who has caused this disruption to our schools. And parents also know that it's the minister that has underinvested in our schools, has created the shortages in education workers and supports that we're already seeing, has created a situation where education workers feel like their backs are against the wall, and if they don't get a wage increase, they're going to have to leave the sector. It is time for the minister to take some responsibility, actually do his job, negotiate a settlement that will keep our kids in school. And what happens tomorrow doesn't change that. It will be up to the minister to put a stop to the disruptions by coming to the table and reaching a settlement with CUPE. I'm happy to take your questions.
So what now? Like, should they go on strike tomorrow? Are you supporting the idea of them going on strike tomorrow?
Well, I can tell you that New Democrats tomorrow will be out standing in solidarity with education workers and parents across the province who are expressing their outrage at this government's policies on education and demanding that our kids have the caring adults and fundamental supports that they deserve in the classroom. And I hope that the minister will be coming to the table to settle this with a deal finally.
Isn't that a slippery slope, though? You're supporting something that's going to be illegal. Like, it's the notwithstanding clause is part of the Constitution. What they're doing is legal, and what the union's going to be doing tomorrow is not. Is that a concern for you?
What the union is doing tomorrow is political protest, and as far as I know, Doug Ford has not tried to rule political protest unconstitutional in Ontario yet.
And it's cool to do that and have kids out of school.
My kids are out of school tomorrow because of the minister. And so my kids may be joining and getting a lesson in political protest, thanks to the minister. Did the minister tell them to go on strike?
This is NDP education critic Chandra Pasma reacting to the news that we just heard from Education Minister Stephen Lecce that the two sides have not reached a deal. She is saying that the NDP will be out standing in solidarity with CUPE education workers tomorrow. We will continue to follow this as we get more and more reaction. Of course, we're likely to hear from CUPE. Soon as well, and we'll bring you any updates as soon as they become available. Let's go live to Queen's Park, where Education Minister Stephen Lecce is speaking. Let's listen in live.
Let's remember why we are here. After demanding a nearly 50% increase in compensation, CUPE threatened to strike. Since then, we've been at the table, literally right up to the last minute today. We've made good faith efforts to reach a fair deal. But all along, CUPE refused to take strikes and disruption off the table. For the sake of Ontario's 2 million students, to keep classrooms open, CUPE has left us with no choice but to pass the Keeping Kids in Class Act. It's disappointing that we have to get here. All along, we have hoped to reach an agreement that's right for students, that's right for parents, right for workers, and for taxpayers in this province. But CUPE wouldn't budge. They refused to take a strike off the table. And I just want to take a moment to speak directly to students and parents in this province. You've heard it directly from union leaders that CUPE will strike tomorrow. If they do so, once this legislation is passed, this strike will be illegal. And we will use every tool we have to end their disruption. I know CUPE's strike action will be hard on you. And I'm sorry CUPE is causing you with this anxiety. We believe you deserve better. And our government is doing everything humanly possible to reduce disruption. To start, I've directed school boards to do everything possible to keep as many schools open for as many students as possible. I've also directed the teachers and staff need to be at work tomorrow, providing live learning. As noted, if CUPE moves forward with their strike, we will do everything we can to reduce this unacceptable disruption on children who have been through so much over the past few years. I didn't want to be here. No one wants to be here. But we will never waver from our promise to do whatever it takes to keep kids in class. With that, I'll take your questions.
You underplayed your hand. I mean, really, you say you're going to keep kids in class, but many schools will be closed tomorrow. So you're not being effective. Have you miscalculated with this union?
CUPE has decided to proceed in a strike since Sunday. We brought forth legislation on Monday on the basis that we have to avert a strike.
But it's not working, Minister. There's going to be a strike tomorrow.
There's going to be an illegal strike tomorrow. If they proceed with it, it will be illegal. And as I made clear, we will use every tool at our disposal to ensure there is not disruptions on children.
Haven't you used every tool? I mean, you've used the notwithstanding clause. You've backed them into a corner. They're still defying you. What are you going to do now?
We've been very clear on our expectation. Kids should have been in the classroom tomorrow. They should be in class tomorrow. And we've now passed a law that sets out a requirement that these workers have to get back to work. And it is my hope and expectation they will show up tomorrow for our kids. And as I noted, and I was clear, we will use every tool available in the legislation to ensure kids are in school and disruption is mitigated for millions of children in Ontario.
What happened at the table today and what were your good faith efforts?
Hello, Aunt Harry. Do we have school or no? We don't have school today, Aunt Harry. Unfortunately, we don't have school today. Yeah, this is like 5, 6 in the morning. I'm live streaming at 5, 6 in the morning.
The mediator decided to call off the discussions just in the last few minutes on the basis that we remained far apart. He's asked for confidence of that table. What I can tell you, though, is what the union did not take off the table for discussions was the fact that they intended to strike tomorrow. In fact, potentially strike beyond that. So
Negotiations are still going. Is that what you're saying?
no, the mediators called them off, and the government is intent to move forward with the bill because there's no other alternatives. The mediator has suggested that we remain too far apart. The government has been clear we're prepared to negotiate right up to the last minute to avert legislation. But unfortunately, they are not taking strikes off the table. They literally will not commit to removing the threat of a strike. And that is really unfair to so many children. I find it unacceptable that millions of people and their parents have to be home, that they're scrambling for childcare because of a difference on fundamentally on higher pay. And I think that's unfair for our kids. And that's why we are made clear on Monday why we're here. Because if we didn't get a deal today, we wouldn't have had legislation that has force with it and powers that try to get the schools back open for the kids we represent.
Minister, are you sure that the federal government won't reserve or disallow Bill 28?
Look, we've been very clear in our intention, using it in a very granular surgical approach with CUPE specifically on the basis that they have committed to a strike. On Sunday, they committed to a strike before there was any use of legislation or inclusion of that provision. They intended to do this 17 days ago when they put themselves on a footing required for a no board. They announced in the summer, before the government even brought forth our first proposal, that they were going to strike. They sought a strike mandate in August.
The federal government, the prime minister last night talked to the premier. He does not like what your government is doing. They have mechanisms that they could use to stop this. Are you sure they are not going to do that?
The premier made clear to the prime minister that we will do what is necessary to ensure kids are in school, that they've been through so much. And the premier believes that our publicly funded schools should be open for children. They should not be disrupted because of a needless, unacceptable strike.
Are you
No choice, but what about
55,000 members?
We've been very clear that we're going to use every tool at our disposal to get these schools open. It's quite sad that we're in a position that we have to move forward with legislation. We should have had a voluntary deal Sunday when the government moved our offer up, increased wages, maintained the benefits and the sick leave and the job security that most folks in this economy could only dream of. But they said no, they intend to strike, and the government must now move forward with legislation that actually will bring some certainty, some stability to kids who have been through so much.
The mechanics of that, is that actually possible? Is that feasible to take 55,000 striking workers before the Ontario Labour Relations Board and fine them $4,000? I mean, is that actually feasible on behalf of the government?
We are going to use every tool available to keep our schools open. Yes, and that is the position of the government. We're going to use every tool in the legislation to keep schools open and to get staff to show up to help our kids. They need to be in school, and we will use every tool available to send a clear, unambiguous message. Schools should be open, and there's accountability for breaking the law.
If you take a step back, have you taken stock of the magnitude of what you're about to do here, to use the notwithstanding clause to end an impending school strike or to impose a contract? I mean, this is going to have ramifications for years down the road, and you're essentially signaling to all of us, to all the people watching, that you don't care about Canadians' rights as they are guaranteed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which sets us apart from, I don't know, any other country. So have you taken stock of the magnitude of what you're doing here?
I think, I'm very cognizant of the extraordinary difficulty the strikes and the pandemics of the past 3 years have had on children in Ontario. This is not a normal time in society. Kids are in a different place. This is not the 90s under the Ray government when there were local strikes, or the Harris government, or the McGuinty government when there were strikes there too. This is a different time. And I would argue most parents would accept the premise. This is an unprecedented challenge on children. And they're seeing the regression in their children's social, emotional, physical, and mental health. And on that basis, we feel strongly that we must do everything available to government to give a voice to children. You speak about those rights. I speak about the right of a child to have an ability to have an education, to be supported. I think about the rights of a child when it comes to access to breakfast programs. There are kids that are not going to eat part of our nutrition programs because they rely on schools as a safe place. The most vulnerable kids among us in all of our communities are the ones who will pay the price most disproportionately. And it is for them that the government is acting.
Are you going to use the notwithstanding clause again in the negotiations that you have ongoing with ETFO, OSSTF, and the other education unions?
We've been very clear. Our preference is to get a voluntary deal, and we're going to continue to work in good faith with our education unions, as I did 3 years ago when we got a deal with every single teacher union in the province of Ontario. I seek to do that again, a deal that is good for workers, but a deal that keeps kids in the classroom. Thank you all.
All right, we've just been listening to Education Minister Stephen Lecce, and it's the news. Of course, parents, caregivers, and families have been dreading the most. It appears, in fact, a strike will indeed go ahead on Friday for the contract talks between CUPE and the province have broken down. The two sides are too far apart. Mediation between CUPE and the province is now over. They cannot come to an agreement, and so the government will go ahead and pass the Keeping Kids in Class Act, which will make a strike illegal.
More about this is Education Minister Stephen Lecce. Minister, thanks for joining us this morning. Clearly, the stakes are high, the temperature is high, but what's it going to take maybe to take the temperature down? On the one side, we've got the strike threat from CUPE, which you have said if they don't remove that, you really can't continue to bargain. And on the flip side, CUPE is saying the invocation of the notwithstanding clause is standing in the way of their right to collective bargaining. Is there any way the temperature can come down before potential action tomorrow?
Look, the government has been abundantly clear on our commitment. We want to keep these kids in school after 2 extraordinary years. I mean, the union, look, I want to put some context of why we are here. The union demanded a nearly 50% increase in compensation, which I think all of us could accept is entirely unreasonable. 33% in salary alone. This is what happened as of Sunday when they decided to proceed with the strike before they knew about the legislation and the tools used within it to ensure their stability. We're doing whatever it takes fundamentally to keep kids in the classroom. And we're here because they have completely unreasonable demands. They have not refused to withdraw that strike. And as such, we have no choice to bring forth this bill, which may pass this afternoon, intended to avert a strike and create some stability. At what point does a government say to the teacher unions and education unions, enough? These kids have been through so much. And it is sad we're here. This is not the first, this is the last resort of any government. But when they are committing to a strike, the government will use every tool at our disposal to provide some stability and certainty for 1 million parents who are being horribly upended tomorrow and 2 million kids who should be in class.
Minister Lecce, you know, speaking of the tools that you're using to try to keep kids in school, is this legislation, but also fines attached to it. So do you think that's really going to stop them from striking? Who do you intend to issue these fines to, and how will that work?
Well, I hope it doesn't get to that. I mean, honestly, I do believe, you know, that I hope common sense will prevail in this respect, that people will be law abiding. I mean, if the bill passes this afternoon, it would be an illegal strike. And there are consequences for that type of action. Now, my hope is in the coming hours, there could be some alternative outcome that allows stability for children. But as I noted, I mean, my intent and the government's intent, the premier has been clear about this, is because the union has on Sunday announced a strike on Friday. If the government didn't introduce this legislation, for those that are watching, then kids would be out of school indefinitely, not just Friday. The union confirmed they want to take this a multi-day strike. They have no end date. And so we are forced to bring forth legislation with the intent of passing it to say to the members, we expect you to show up for our kids. And I believe our members work hard. They do amazing things in our school, and I'm grateful for them, which is why we're going to increase their pay every year, 10% over 4 years, maintaining the best benefits, health benefits for them and their family, and pensions, and 131 sick days. All we ask is you take the strike off the table and work with government to get these kids back on track. But regrettably, they have dismissed this request, and they're proceeding on the strike, and thus the government will have to move forward with this bill.
Okay, Minister, of course, the union does have to give that 5 days of notice in order to sort of put that warning out there. You just talked about, the coming hours. So we know talks could be happening today. Can you tell us, will they be happening today? What is the latest on bargaining? Will there be more discussions with CUPE today?
We've never left the table with the union. We stand ready, always have with any willing partner. But there needs to be the threat of a strike off the table. They didn't take it off the table. We're now at the point, literally, on the day that the bill is intended to pass. I mean, honestly, folks, we're hours away from this bill passing its third reading, the final vote until it could become the law. And the union had ample opportunity to bring forth reasonable proposals. And on Sunday, when they decided to strike, it was because they were not getting what they wanted on compensation, 11 points a year, every year. We're talking about, in our case, a 4-year program. Most people are not receiving automatic benefits, pensions, and salary increases and total absolute job security. And I'm not taking any of these elements away from them. In fact, I'm enhancing them. Right now, we're in a debate about the rate of growth of their entitlements and their pay. And I do believe they do good work. I do believe we have to give them a competitive wage. We pay them the highest in the country. They make $27 an hour. And frankly, in Toronto and in the GTA, it's much higher. So my point in short is we brought something reasonable. They've brought forth a unreasonable demand, originally as it was, a nearly 50% increase. And most people see through that. And if this is about the kids, I'm urging them. And as I said, as of, up in the last few days, they should have canceled the strike, and they need to show up for work Friday and make a difference. Show us all the good work you do, and we'll bring forth a program, a contract that I think is fair, is reasonable, is affordable, and puts students at the center of the contract by keeping them in the classroom.
And yet it seems like things are at an impasse, and now OPSEU is planning to join this strike. We'll see how it goes today. But Education Minister Stephen Lecce, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Outside of the Sheraton Centre with more on the bitter contract talks between the province and education workers. Chanel, what's the latest?
Jen, what's a fog cracker?
We're all wondering.
I don't know. It's a villain from a horror movie.
Okay. Okay, you'll have to explain it to me later.
Yes.
For now, let's talk about what's happening here at the Sheridan Center. So we know talks have been happening here the last couple of days. They wrapped up last night at about 9 o'clock, and then they'll resume this morning. So negotiations continue right now between the province and the union here, CUPE. There is still a small chance that we could see these two sides reach a deal before that strike deadline tomorrow. But as we've been talking about all morning, that window is closing. So we're getting really close to the final few hours here. There's not a lot of time, but we could see something happen in the next couple of hours before tonight to avoid that strike from happening tomorrow. We know yesterday that the province actually rejected CUPE's counter offer. Minister Stephen Lecce had said, look, we can't reach a deal unless you take this strike off the table.
With his actions and his words, the Minister of Education has indicated throughout this process that he doesn't understand how negotiations work. Will allow me to play my role as an educational assistant and ensure that every student understands the material. The right to strike is a fundamental right. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. It's an indispensable part of collective bargaining, and there is no effective bargaining process without it. Workers organizing each other and mobilizing through a potential strike is the only way that workers can get even close to leveling the playing field.
So since CUPE refused to rescind that strike notice, the province is pushing ahead with this controversial bill called Keeping Students in Class Act. That, Jen and Nick, would essentially make striking illegal come tomorrow. Workers who at the picket lines, they could face fines of up to $4,000 a day, although it's unlikely that that would actually be enforced. It would, though, force the union to accept the province's deal without any legal recourse because of that notwithstanding clause. So that bill is set to pass at Queen's Park later on this afternoon, Nick and Jen, and it's unclear what may happen after that, whether or not talks and negotiations will continue between the two sides. But look, CUPE has been very clear this entire time that regardless of what happens at Queen's Park, they do plan on hitting the picket lines, on protesting tomorrow, unless a deal is reached by tonight. So potentially we could see up to 55,000 education workers out on the picket lines throughout the day tomorrow, and that would mean about 2 million students wouldn't be allowed to enter their classrooms. Back to you.
All right, Chanel, thanks.
55,000 education workers out on the picket lines throughout the day tomorrow, and that would mean about 2 million students wouldn't be allowed to enter their classrooms. Back to you.
All right, Chanel, thanks for that.
The CUPE education workers say they will strike Friday and will continue striking until further notice unless a non-legislated deal with the government is reached. And CP24's Christina Tenalia joins us live with more on what the union is saying. Christina.
So, Bakari, according to the union, talks at the Sheridan Hotel have wrapped up for the night and they'll resume in the morning. The latest from CUPE earlier today is that they provided an offer to the government that they say had a substantial change and that the government rejected it. The government's position is that they continue to try and work things out at the negotiating table. Now, we're here out front of Queen's Park, where tomorrow afternoon it is expected that the government's legislation to impose a 4-year contract on teachers, on education workers, let me be clear, a 4-year contract on education workers, that will pass. And again, I know sometimes there's confusion about this. I even had a slip of the mind here now. These are education workers. There are 55,000 CUPE education workers. This includes educational assistants, early childhood educators, secretaries, custodians, those who help the school and students to function at their and its best. The position from the union tonight is that if a deal is not reached on Friday, those 55,000 education workers will hit the picket line, and they will do so indefinitely until a deal is reached. Here's more from CUPE's Laura Walton.
We had hoped that this government would recognize the importance of bargaining and appreciate that my 55,000 frontline education coworkers need a fair agreement. Their behavior has shown they do not. My coworkers and I still want to reach a negotiated agreement that will guarantee the types of services that students need to succeed, help school boards solve their very real problems of hiring and keeping qualified employees, and provide education workers
with the long overdue wage increases that they desperately need. In response, this government is stalled. They've said no to every proposal. They've offered only cuts. And this week they introduced legislation that would impose a collective agreement and drive more of my coworkers, the lowest paid education workers in the province, further into poverty.
So as of now, as of Friday, 55,000 education workers in the province have been instructed to hit the picket line outside MPP offices and other government offices across the province. And again, the message is they will do so until a deal is reached. Now, Bakari, to give you some perspective, and certainly I feel like this time around things have been a little bit more cumbersome in terms of negotiations than 3 years ago. But back in 2019, a deal was reached. It was about an hour before the deadline. So, you know, anything is possible here, and certainly both sides would like to see a deal reached. But in saying that, the government's legislation that imposes a 4-year contract on education workers is expected to pass here at Queen's Park tomorrow afternoon. In saying that, though, there's nothing to suggest that the government has to quickly seek royal assent, a formality that ensures a bill becomes law. They could essentially, you know, pass this bill, sit on it, continue to negotiate a deal. And of course, that's the goal for both sides, that a deal is reached. I'm covering the CUPE and the union end of things. Bakari, I know you'll have more with what the government has to say and the impact on parents and students. Back to you.
Live at Queen's Park, CP24's Christina Tinalia. Thank you, Christina. Education Minister Stephen Lecce is demanding CUPE remove their threat of job action in order to reach a deal.
I want to be very clear. This is the last resort option for any government, the former government and this government. But in the absence of action and leadership, doing what is difficult but frankly necessary to provide stability, we're not going to tolerate Friday and next week, when the legislature doesn't sit, potentially multi-day strike on kids. Like, honestly, I say this often, but I mean it. At what point does a government say enough?
And here's the latest on plans by the various school boards to deal with Friday's walkout by CUPE members. The TDSB and York Region District School Board, as well as the Catholic boards in Toronto, Halton, and York regions, will close if CUPE members are not at schools. The TDSB also says that schools will remain closed for the duration of any strike action. The Peel District School Board plans to close classrooms, but will have virtual learning. In Halton Region, the public board has decided that it will be able to keep elementary and secondary schools open. Other school boards haven't given a definitive answer on their plans, but are taking a wait-and-see approach. Well, CP24 had a chance to speak with parents this afternoon about the potential looming strike on Friday and the impact of kids out of class.
Would you have to take any time off of your work?
Yes, I do, because if there's no school, which means I have to take an off from my work, so which is not acceptable, and I would love school to be opened.
Unfortunately, I have a shop, and I have to close my shop, and it's hard for me as a single parent too.
I'll have a backup sitter. I'll have my mom to watch my daughter while I go to work. So that's what my plan is. Lucky I have a sitter to watch her, yeah. So that's my plan, is to just continue going to work and see what happens from there.
And we're also learning Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke with Ontario Premier Doug Ford about his government's use of the notwithstanding clause. Trudeau tweeted, "I spoke with Premier Doug Ford today. I emphasized the importance of standing up for Canadians' rights and freedoms, including workers' rights, and I reiterated that the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause is wrong and inappropriate." The Premier's office also released a statement on the call with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that reads in part, quote, "The Premier made clear that shutting down classrooms would have an unacceptable impact on students who are already struggling after 2 years of pandemic disruption." He also reiterated that Ontario is determined, if necessary, to pass legislation to keep classrooms open and ensure certainty and stability for parents and students now and in the future.
All right, guys. So I just want to show you guys. I hope you guys really enjoy watching the video and tell you guys what's going on. But here are also where all the pit locations line. Here is where, and this is where the location where the picket line will be Friday across Ontario. Toronto, Queen's Park, 111 Wellington Street West, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. 14 Mark Road, Unit 315, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. So 120 Lakeshore Road West, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Scarborough, 22063 Lawrence Avenue East, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Hennessy 215 Hennessy Road and Unit 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 456 Belgium Street East, Unit 12. Same time. 1 Gateway Boulevard, Unit 307, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Markham, we're going in New York, so Markham, Cadillac Fairview, Markham Mall, 556 Highway 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Richmond Hill, 955 Young Street, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Woodbridge Mall, 5100 Robinson Road, Unit 3, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Oakville, 4 Rebecca Street, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. 2525 Oak Brook Road, Unit 550, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. Lake Ridge Mall. All right, we're going into Hamilton. Lake Ridge Mall, 999 Upper Westport Street, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. Eastgate Mall, 75 Centennial Parkway North, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. 115 Highway 8, Unit 102, a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Burlington, 3027 Harvester Road, Suite 306, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. 6746 Morrison Street, Unit 1, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. in Niagara Falls. So for Burlington, this is Burlington right here. Oh, Hamilton. And so there's 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and 1:30 to 5:30 p.m. This is the big strike that we saw. St. Catharines, Service Ontario Government Building, 301 St. Paul Street, ground floor, 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. 209 Carlton Street, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and 1:30 to 5:30 p.m. So 3 shifts there. So so Barrie, 20 Bell Farm Road, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. 237 Mapleview Drive, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Oakville. We're actually Ottawa, actually. So 110 Site Preview Road, 7:30 a.m. 10:30 to 11:30 and 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 1 to 5 p.m. 5 and 1 Between 500, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m., 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and 1 to 5 p.m. Ringbank Road, 78 Ringbank Road. The club will be at Greenbank Road at 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and 1 to 5 p.m.
The HDSB says that Cupid represents their custodial staff.
Kingston, 837 Princess Street, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. King City, 220 King Road, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4 p.m. Or 12:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. Pickering. So for 1550 Kingston Road, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:45 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. So we're in the Durham now. 230 Wesley Road South Suite, 502, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:45 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. Oh, Whitby, Anticipation Act. So Whitby, Ontario, 114 Dundas Street East, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:45 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. Oshawa, 78 Center Street North, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:45 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. And Bowmanville, 23 King Street West, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Stouffville, 37 Sanford Drive, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Kitchener, 281 King Street East, for 7:30 to 11:30 and 11 a.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and 2 to 6 p.m. Waterloo, 100 China Street, 200, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and 2 to 6 p.m. South Ste. Marie. So we're going all areas of the province here. So we're going actually all areas of the province. So we're actually going all areas of the province. All right, for next week. We'll keep you covered here on Breakfast Television. But we have other things going on.
Yeah, so we're going to make someone's Friday because we're going to give away. Yeah, let's do it. I feel like we need it. So I have the PT, of course, happening after 8 o'clock with Diva Brown. Will be joining us a little bit later. We're giving away $1,000. You can wear good stuff.
I think we'll do it. We'll go into the weekend.
Please do it for me, okay? I want to do the cowbell twice. My turn.
You want to hit the cowbell? You've got your cowbell issues over the last week. So hopefully things run smooth.
You know, I'll pick up the ball.
You're locked in the clock. I buy it. Not only will give away $1,000 in Pescados, but
it wasn't after this one, yeah.
That was going to absolutely work for Stephanie.
It wasn't after this morning.
We tested it outside, so we want to step down.
You know that it wasn't after this morning.
If not, I'm going to find like
probably got a little bit cooler than
night. Or something.
They got a little bit more cooler, they got even more thicker.
What is going on?
What is going on? It has not lifted. It's an awful commute. I'm sure you all both drove in this morning. I know it's not ideal. Take your time. That's all I can say. You really want to go.
Get sleep, just like me. No escape.
That's so
No free
cute.
well, unless that would be up to
Now, the positive of this is that we actually don't have a lot of collisions right now. It's
Yeah,
going Friday morning so far. No collisions, not a ton of volume around QEW, but again, the fog is what we're really dealing with. And then on the eastbound 401, as you approach your Ontario,
No, not dealing with.
we still have that.
Apparently they tried to
Issue there, but it does look like that problem has just cleared away. So that's great news. That's not vehicle has cleared because it's difficult to see it in this fog. Now we're taking a look at the 401. right around here, Ontario. You can see everything moving smoothly through here, but it's the fog we're dealing with. Southbound John Valley Parkway, quite heavy going from the 401 all the way down to about south of Lawrence. Once you're past Lawrence, heading towards that Richmond ramp, no delays or problems at this time. Gardner Expressway heading into the downtown core, you'll find that quite busy. And a new problem just popping up right now that is northbound on 427, approaching the 409. A part of that right lane is blocked with a stalled vehicle. Unibet's hundreds of casino games are coming to Canada. Download Unibet and start playing slots, table games, and live dealer casino today. 19 plus, Ontario residents only. Play responsibly. All right, coming up at 8:18, Frankie is learning some tennis moves from the pros. We will go live to the Ancaster Tennis Club, where they just unveiled new indoor courts. They look gorgeous. That's coming up.
Breakfast television is brought to you by Tim's new Maple Bacon Breakfast Sandwiches, featuring crispy bacon with a sweet and spicy maple glaze. Get it while you can.
Start your day with a twist on a classic. Crispy smoked bacon with a sweet and spicy maple glaze made with 100% Canadian maple syrup and Canadian fresh cracked eggs. Try the new Maple Bacon Breakfast Sandwiches. Only available at Tim's for a limited time.
This work is a calling and a passion. Our mental health and substance use teams want you to join Island Health and come be part of the solution with us. Sign up online. We are Island Health, creating the future together.
This holiday, deals have no limits at Last Week's Bad Boy. Black November deals on furniture, appliances, electronics, and mattresses. Suggest to win a hot Sony PlayStation 5 console in-store, online, and social media. Hurry in. Who's good?
Can a cream really reduce the look of wrinkles? Women try Revitalac, Triple Power Laser. The wrinkles look so much softer. Triple Power Laser visibly reduces the look of wrinkles, burn, and brighten our waves. I saw results in 1 week. Revitalac by L'Oreal Paris. It does what it says. Simple as that.
Get the unstoppable Shark Hydrovac. It powerfully vacuums at high-speed blocks at the same time. From the wet to the dry. Even the Hydrovac offers all the likenesses. Shark Hydrovac, the unstoppable power of clean.
Audible original stories.
For stories about Canadians.
Listen to storytellers.
They're an escape. It's so much fun to bring the book to life.
Listen. On Audible. Seasonal dryness? Not anymore. Aveeno Skin Relief Lotion immediately starts to relieve itchy, dry skin with prebiotic triple O complex and shea butter for softer, smoother skin in just 1 day. Aveeno, naturally beautiful results.
Dream big again with the Princess Margaret Home Run. Don't miss our world famous $2.8 million early bird prize. A stunning Muskoka lakefront cottage built by Linwood plus $100,000 cash. And you'll be in for the incredible $7.2 million grand prize. Homes, cottages, condos, over 25,000 prizes valued at $20
4 or 5 million. All right. Sault Ste. Marie. I think we left off around Sault Ste. Marie. All right. Sault Ste. Marie, 390 Bay Street, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Sault Ste. Marie Civic Center, City Hall, 999 Foster Drive, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Alvara. 73 Archer Street into Unit 3 and 4, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Torhina. No, 23,550 Woodbine Avenue, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Nipissing. The Pond, 113 East Street, 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Belleville, 103 Ontario Street, 2 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 to 4 p.m. London, 214 Commissioners Road West, Unit 101, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and 2 to 6 p.m. 155 Clark Road, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Windsor, 220, 240, 403 Double Avenue, a.m. 12 p.m. 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Road, 8 a.m. 12 p.m. 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Asher, 33 Talbot Street, a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Chatham, 111 Heritage Road, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Leamington, Unit B, 115 Ernie Street North, and at 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. St. Thomas, 750 Talbot Street, Suite 202, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and 2 to 6 p.m. After the first shift happening. Sudbury, 555 Berry Downey Road, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. House of Algona, Wandering Lake Hope Street, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 11:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. West Nipissing, 193 King Street, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. North Bay, 219 Main Street East, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thunder Bay, 774 King Street North, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. At Houghton, Suite 105 Main Street, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. At Nick, Southway, 104 Main Street, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. South Bay Lookout, Tim Hortons, Wellington Street and 5th Avenue, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Red Lake Clubway, 11, area 105, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Morrison, 1st Street, corner of College Daycare, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Ear Hall, Echo Gas Station, Ontario, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Newmarket, John CMPP office, Weatherside, 9th Street, 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Holland Landing, and Caroline Mulrooney MPP office, 45 Richards Mill Road, 8 to 12 a.m. and 11:30 to 3:30 p.m. So for more ticket information on where to find the nearest ticket line, Ontarians can go to the QP ticket on their website and input their address on the map of where to go.
This ship where you can park, these views are.
Honestly, we will be checking information nonstop. So, with it being the weekend, though, how did we get to this point? Most of this point up until this point. At this point in the dispute, very, very unusual. Because for most of the year up until this point, really much.
And if the vessel believes in it a little bit, even better for the races.
I think there was even a press conference from QP, I think we'll get back on Wednesday, talking about this strike. So we are willing to take the risk that if I have to do work, I will have to hop off. We're live from Toronto. Morning. Things change forever. Yeah, I can recall 7 a.m. we were off, but we haven't left the air. we've been going off air, but we
Laura Walton, president of the CUPE Ontario School Board Council, is speaking to the media on the
that
latest on the
we
contract
haven't really
negotiations.
left here.
We'll listen in live now.
We are laser focused on getting a deal. We have made significant moves in all areas in hope of reaching a deal while ensuring that workers have good wages and that students and families have better services. And yet, it has been the consistent theme ever since we first asked to negotiate the very first day possible on June 3rd, more than 150 days ago, that the Conservative government is dragging their feet. What's changed now is that instead of delaying and stalling, the government is outright refusing to participate. You're left wondering if they ever wanted a deal at all. We had hoped that this government would recognize the importance of bargaining and appreciate that my 55,000 frontline education coworkers need a fair agreement. Their behavior has shown they do not. My coworkers and I still want to reach a negotiated agreement that will guarantee the types of services that students need to succeed, help school boards solve their very real problems of hiring and keeping qualified employees, and provide education workers with the long overdue wage increases that they desperately need. In response, this government is stalled. They've said no to every proposal. They've offered only cuts. And this week they introduced legislation that would impose a collective agreement and drive more of my coworkers, the lowest paid education workers in the province, further into poverty. With his actions and his words, the Minister of Education has indicated throughout this process that he doesn't understand how negotiations work. Well, allow me to play my role as an educational assistant and ensure that every student understands the material. The right to strike is a fundamental right. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. It's an indispensable part of collective bargaining, and there is no effective bargaining process without it. Workers organizing each other and mobilizing through a potential strike is the only way that workers can get even close to leveling the playing field. That's true in the private sector. It's especially true in the public sector, when the employer is the government that has shown their true authoritarian colors and has a history of trampling workers' rights. The Ford government's actions have moved this beyond a question of better jobs and better services. They have attacked all workers. Stephen Lecce is saying to my co-workers, give up your rights before I strip them. We are not willing to let him do that, and we will defend and exercise our rights. Serving strike notice was completely legal. Our central bargaining committee, made up of frontline education workers from across the province, has followed every single legal process as required from the beginning. We've done nothing out of the ordinary. And unlike the Ford government, we remain at the table ready to bargain. The strike date is not interfering with bargaining. Two things are interfering. The first is a piece of regressive legislation currently on the floor of Queen's Park that strips away the rights of workers. The second is the minister's complete refusal to negotiate. This government owes it to students, to families, to workers, and to all Ontarians to change their course. I will now open for questions. Chris.
Hi there, thanks. Can you hear me?
I can.
So let's just be clear for parents so that they have certainty. So you will be going ahead with the Friday strike protest as planned?
Unless a deal is reached.
Do you not think, though, that you owe parents a bit of certainty? I mean, it's Wednesday. If they need childcare, they need to be planning that now as opposed to, late tomorrow night.
Yeah, and respectfully, Chris, that's why there's the 5-day notice. Nothing has changed. We served 5 days of notice on Sunday. We have always said moving forward, and it would have been the same, if we did not have legislation. If you remember, Chris, and I do remember you and I well, back in 2019, people waiting by their phones, waiting, at the final hours when a deal came through at the cusp of when the strike would have happened. This is not uncommon. And so, yes, we have, provided the 5-day notice. Parents should be making arrangements, and we will be proceeding. But that doesn't mean we're not going to try and get a deal before that happens. Carolyn?
Hi, Laura. Can you hear me?
I can.
You said earlier that the government is refusing to participate. Can you expand on that? What do you mean? Are they not coming to the table?
So right now we work with a mediator. And what's really causing problems is that we are thinking that we are working through the mediator and that the parties are actively bargaining. And then we hear from the minister that they're not. As we know, the minister provides direction to his staff at the Ministry of Education. It is sending a lot of mixed messages. And so, we are under the understanding that we're waiting for a response. But now we're hearing from the minister that if we don't remove our notice of strike, there will be no response. We need some clear answers from the government.
So sorry, I'm unclear. Does that mean that all negotiating teams are at the table or they're not?
So at this point, we actually aren't all at one table. It would be nice to be in that situation, but we're not. So our team is here. I understand that the CTA team, the Council of Trustees Associations, is here. And my understanding is that ministry staff is here. But then we have the minister coming out today saying that bargaining would not be continuing until our notice of strike was removed.
Sorry, aside from what the minister is saying, what is happening at the hotel? I mean, what is happening with your proposal, your counter proposal?
We are awaiting a response from the government, from the Council of Trustees Association to our response.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Colin.
Hi, Laura. I understand that Bill Kaplan, the mediator, has asked you guys to maybe keep all the negotiations confidential. So to the degree that you can you describe for us where CUPE has gone to? Are you still asking for the 11% per year increase, or have you climbed down from that position?
So we have made substantial moves across the board on all of our positions in order to try and achieve a deal.
Okay, and so for all of the parents who are watching, I understand that you can't really tell us exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of days, but you're basically saying that if the government, which has already presented its final offer, doesn't increase its final offer, then you're going on strike.
That's correct.
They've offered between 1.25 to 2.5%. What specifically are you looking for?
Well, for instance, their wage proposal is actually less than it was before because they've put in more pieces that would actually prevent workers from getting the 2.5. Upon reflection on it, and we spent a lot of time on it yesterday, the vast majority of our workers would only receive 1.5%, which is actually less than the 2% that they offered back in August. There's also a concern about the service security that we really need to see that happening. We do not have that in position right now. There is a concern moving forward in regards to the investments for staffing. We have a lot of concerns that are just simply not addressed by this legislated offer. And let's be clear, it's a legislated offer. It's either take this or re-legislate it that was put on the table. Ahmed?
Hey, Laura, there seemed to have been a suggestion from the government that, CUPE was stalling. You were outside yesterday protesting, and you didn't really submit the counter proposal until late in the evening when, you said that talks had ended for the night. What is your response to the suggestion that CUPE was stalling yesterday?
Yeah, CUPE wasn't stalling. We had to wait to receive what was a pass that showed us all of the changes that they had made. That's a normal piece that happens when you're doing negotiations. You show where you've made changes. It's called track changes. We didn't get that document into our hands yesterday. So we were going through it step by step by step to see what changes were actually made. And that's when we discovered that their wage proposal is actually less than August's.
All right. We did see, a protest outside of Queen's Park yesterday. Have there been any discussions with, the other education unions about, a unified response to the legislation? What has been considered over the past few days?
I think what we saw yesterday is just the beginning of the outpouring of solidarity amongst workers, and not just unionized workers, but workers in general, really having some very grave concerns on the process that this government is taking. We've seen, unions that are typically, friendly with Doug Ford come out and denounce what he is doing. It's clear this was a bad mistake. And, we are saying you have a chance to actually change the course of this right now. Alan.
There we go. So can you give us a little more information of what the plan is for the protests on Friday? We've heard a bit that it's all going to be in front of MPP's offices and not schools. Is that correct?
That's correct. At this point, it's very clear where the issue is lying, and the issue is lying at the government. As a matter of fact, the school boards need what we have proposed at the table in order to do their jobs respectively. So, our goal is not to, disrupt the school day. Our goal is to be out in front of these MPPs' offices.
Are you expecting the schools to be able to run regardless? Like if by you not being on site, that's going to allow them to stay open?
Well, let's be clear, there's a lot of schools that are closing already, and that's because these schools understand the value of the work that we provide and know that without us, these schools are not going to be safe and students aren't going to be supported. It's really unfortunate that this government doesn't share the same opinion and come to the table with a deal that actually respects workers.
Okay. Can you please give me like a good idea of why you can't just withdraw the 5 days notice? I mean, if you've already broken the ice on moving on your positions, both sides have now. So that difficult part is over. Couldn't you just withdraw the 5 days, go back to the table, and if things break down again, you could have another 5 day notice? Like that strike mandate's not going anywhere as far as I understand.
So respectfully, Alan, I think the big problem is the very bad faith bargaining that is happening right now. To bring in a party and say, either take this or you're going to be legislated. If this was really about, preventing the strike and having those conversations, you don't come in and tell somebody that, we're going to legislate you. You come in and you bring an offer and you work on this. I think the question that you need to be asking the, government is, why are you still determined to remove the rights of workers rather than coming to the table and negotiate?
I mean, we do ask that to the education minister, and we only get the answers we get. But I mean, I just don't quite understand it. You're both in a staring contest, and one of you has to blink. And if the government doesn't blink, they win. In this case, if they pass that legislation, I don't know what else happens. So why not just take a breather now that, everybody's moved off of their positions that they've been on without wavering for weeks. Now that ice is broken, and just try again. And if it doesn't work, then we'll be back at this again.
And if it doesn't work, we'd be back at this again. And that's exactly the problem. We've got a government that has overreached their authority by interfering with the charter rights and human rights of workers. You know, a strike notice, first of all, normally outside of the school board sector, there's not even the requirement of the 5 days. You know, that is with us, you know, actually following the legal requirements. And at this point, we do not have faith in the government that they will do the right thing. Adrienne.
Thank you. Yes, I was just wondering what we can expect on Friday. You mentioned some protests in front of some MPP offices. Are there any in particular where you expect a larger crowd, and what time are you expecting this will happen? Is there anything planned in terms of picket lines or a protest at Queen's Park as well?
Yeah, there is across the province, you know, hundreds of locations that will be going up. This is a picket. They will be out in front on strike on Friday, you know, across the province. And I don't have that list in front of me. I wish I do, but I do believe it is public knowledge over on the CUPE Ontario website.
Thank you.
Randy.
Hi, Laura. I got a question here. A lot of talk about the penalty that could be imposed on workers for taking strike action once the bill passes. What are you telling your workers? How are they dealing with that part of the bill?
Yeah, no, definitely. So once again, you can see how desperate this government is to just punish workers, you know, and putting in place fines that are double what would normally be in place. But, you know, we are part of a very large union and an even larger labor movement. And so there will be direction that will be provided to members on what to do should they receive a fine and how to proceed. We will be there for them, with them every step of the way.
One other question. School boards in our area have not made a decision yet on whether to close schools, given that your members will likely be in front of MPP's offices. Teachers, I guess, have to cross your picket line if you were in front of schools. I guess what advice would you give parents? I mean, keep kids at home if they're not going to close schools, or stay home?
So my advice to parents is to come and visit us on the picket line. You know, bring your child. We are going to be having child-friendly picket lines there with activities for the kids. We really love working with our students. We don't want to be out of our schools on Friday. We want to be in our schools on Friday, but we also want to be able to be in our schools every single day and be able to put a roof over our head, food on our table, and ensure there's enough services for our students every single day. Not just Friday, not just Monday, not just Tuesday, but every single day moving forward. Allison.
Hi, Laura. I know we're obviously talking a lot about Friday and the plans that parents are going to have to make. And I know you've been asked this before, but what happens beyond Friday? You know, will parents need to make those same plans for next week?
Yes, at this point, you know, without anything changing, we are on strike until further notice starting Friday, unless a deal is reached.
All right, and I know you were just asked about the fines. You had suggested that you're part of a larger labor movement. Does that mean that you've spoken with other unions who will help from their own sort of strike funds or reserve funds to pay those fines?
There's constant negotiations and conversations happening with different groups of people, you know, moving forward and how we are going to do this. You know, I think it's really important to understand that workers are determined, regardless of the union that they belong to ensure that this government is not interfering with worker rights. It is one thing to, you know, say, hey, we don't want to have a strike. It's another thing to interfere with rights. And I think that that's where, you know, clearly we now are seeing that the federal government is getting involved in this. This is much bigger than it ever needed to be. And simply all of this could be put to rest by just coming to the table with a fair offer that respects workers, respects families, and respects students. Craig? Craig? Not sure if he's there.
Yeah, there we go. Excuse me. CUPE was, you mentioned that has come off of some of their positions earlier in bargaining. One of those was a $3.25 an hour across the board raise. Has that number come down? Has that changed since earlier in the bargaining with the government here?
So as per direction by our mediator, Bill Kaplan, I'm not at liberty to share that information. I really wish I could, but I did understand completely why Bill wanted to keep this confidential. As a matter of fact, I was quite surprised the amount that was shared by the minister with you today. But you know what? We have our integrity. We've made an agreement with Bill, and we will not be breaking that here.
And the other thing is, to follow up a little bit on Allison's question, she asked about the following week and the fines that would be associated with that. So as of right now, here in London, they've said, okay, school's not going to be open on Monday, or on Friday rather. Should our boards and should boards start to plan for not having schools open on Monday and beyond if they've already said, hey, we're not going to be around on Friday either?
Yeah, I don't direct the boards on what they need to do. I know that the boards are in constant conversation with the Council of Trustees Association, and that's what I would expect to be happening. I think, what's even more important is people should be talking to this minister and talking to the premier and asking, why are we moving to this level of disruption? And it's simply because they will not come here and talk and offer these workers, the lowest paid workers in the province of Ontario, who were on site throughout the pandemic, a fair wage. And they also are not looking at the services that are required to keep students successful and safe in our schools. I mean, simply put, we're talking about putting an ECE in every kindergarten classroom across the province. For some reason, that's something that this government doesn't want to do. The question needs to be put to them, not to us. Siobhan?
Hi, Laura. You talked about being surprised by Minister Lecce's position, saying that he wasn't going to entertain your offer. What do you understand from what Mr. Kaplan's telling you about what is happening on the government side, about whether you actually can expect a response apart from what Mr. Lecce is saying?
Our understanding this morning was that a response was going to be coming today. So it was quite surprising to hear the minister say this morning, because that's not the information that we had. We quickly touched base with the mediator, and I know that he's been talking further with the government and the Council of Trustees Association.
And you haven't had any further update then based on that request? Okay.
Alrighty. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you need anything further, please do not hesitate to contact Ken Marsnick. Thank you so much. Take care.
And you've been listening to Laura Walton, president of the CUPE Ontario School Board Council, speaking to reporters there. She said she's laser focused on getting a deal still with the provincial government. She says the right to strike is a fundamental right, and it's a crucial part of bargaining. She also confirmed that if the government does not increase its offer, then CUPE members, those 55,000 workers, will be going on strike as of Friday. And she also talked about the plan for Friday protests, saying it will be out front of MPP's offices, not out front of schools, because she says that is where the issue lies.
Now it's time to listen to some CTV news. Toronto was fired in the overnight hours.
Strike until further. We are on strike until further.
to keep classrooms open. CUPE has left us with no choice but to pass the Keeping Kids in Class Act.
You can put in all of the legislation in place, but you cannot control a worker movement that is so fed up with your overreach.
On the eve of a potential strike, the province and its education workers turn their backs on a deal, leaving families scrambling to make childcare plans for tomorrow and perhaps beyond. Good evening. Hope of any resolution to this fight before day's end is fading and fast.
Between the province and CUPE broke off mid-afternoon, and starting tomorrow, barring late-night efforts, schools across Ontario will be closed to in-person learning. CTV's Queen's Park reporter Siobhan Morris has been following this story from the start, and she joins us now live. Siobhan.
Nathan, a bill that was intended to block a strike and impose a contract on CUPE workers is now the law in Ontario, but a defiant CUPE says they'll be on picket lines tomorrow.
CUPE leaders kicked out of Queen's Park as MPPs voted to approve a historic piece of legislation, a bill that imposes a contract on 55,000 educational support workers. The education minister says he had no choice after a mediator called off talks, the parties too far apart.
It's disappointing that we have to get here. All along, we have hoped to reach an agreement that's right for students, that's right for parents, right for workers, and for taxpayers in this province. But CUPE wouldn't budge.
CUPE says it cut its wage request down by more than half, the most their members could tolerate.
To hear today that the minister is concerned about people not being able to eat, children not being able to eat, is a smack in the face to the quarter of my members that are already at food banks.
It means CUPE EAs, custodians, and early childhood educators.
We are on strike
until our members decide otherwise.
The union says parents should make alternate arrangements for their kids next week.
We've been very clear that we're going to use every tool at our disposal to get these schools open.
The toolbox includes fines of $500,000 a day for the union, something CUPE says it will fight, but cover if it needs to. There could also be penalties for striking workers.
If the government of Ontario wants to clog up the justice system with $4,000 per member per day fines, then I say bring it on.
The government's using the notwithstanding clause to guard against a constitutional challenge of the bill.
I'm very cognizant of the extraordinary difficulty the strikes and the pandemics of the past 3 years have had on children in Ontario. This is not a normal time in society.
CUPE sees the use of the clause as a galvanizing force for workers.
It impacts every public sector worker, every private sector worker. This is about trade union rights. This is about workers' rights. And that is why you are seeing growing support across the province. They don't know what they have started here.
The Minister of Education has instructed school boards to do everything they can to keep classrooms open for learning for students. But most school boards in Ontario have said they don't see how it can be done with CUPE members out. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Zoraida, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Well, down the street from Siobhan is our Beth McDonnell, live outside the Sheridan Centre, where people are rallying against the actions of the Ford government. Beth.
The Ontario Parent Action Network has organized this rally. There are several dozen people here who are in support of education workers. They say they are unhappy with the Ford government's approach. They've been cheering, holding signs, and they got creative making this bargaining table. It has question marks around the name of Ford and Lecce. And I'm with one of the organizers of the rally, Rachel Hewitt. Rachel, please tell me, what is this bargaining table all about that you have in front here?
This is a symbolic bargaining table. You'll notice that Ford and Lecce are missing from the bargaining table, and it's meant to represent where they should be. We want to see the Ford government, Lecce, back at the bargaining table with education workers.
you are a parent. Many parents will not have their children in school tomorrow. You know, why are you supporting janitors, EAs, the other workers, if it's also important to have your kids in school?
Of course, I want my kids in school. I have 3 kids in the public school system, but I also respect education workers' rights to collectively bargain, and that's how workers improve their working conditions. And when those working conditions are improved, conditions are also improved for kids like mine, kids here, and parents across Ontario.
You know, there are 2 sides to this. You know, what do you want CUPE to know? What do you want the Ford government to know?
I want education workers to know that parents are standing with them. We understand and recognize the hard work they do every day in our classrooms and our school buildings. We see that work, we see them, and we think they deserve to be treated with respect and paid decently for that work. We also recognize that we need services and more funding for a public education system so that all kids can get their learning needs met.
Thank you very much. Now, this rally will be continuing till about 7 o'clock. We'll be standing by. Now back to the station.
Thank you, Beth. And we have much more online, including information on closures and what activities may be available Friday around the GTA for parents and their families. It's on our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca.
The temperature's been pretty comfortable most of today, but the soup-like conditions caused by fog made it a little tough to get around. We'll get more details on all that in our first weather update coming up in just a few minutes. Is point since
to take into account
the memo right now, a comfortable day, but a tough one for people.
Minutes.
And here's a live look of the city right now. A comfortable day, but a tough one for people trying to drive around the region thanks to the fog. Lindsay Morrison's here with a look at the current conditions. Lindsay.
Well, Nathan, it's really just in the last couple of hours that we've finally seen some of that fog start to lift, especially downtown Toronto, but it remains dense in areas like Scarborough through Durham region over toward Cobourg and Kingston. That's where a fog advisory remains at this hour. Here's a look at the satellite and radar. It gives you a little bit of an idea of where the fog remains currently. Because of the excess cloud cover that we ended up having this afternoon, we didn't quite make it to our forecast daytime high of 15 in Toronto. But again, just in the last hour or two, we have really warmed up. 13 at this hour, only 7 in Oshawa, again, where the fog is significantly thicker. And look at that, it is 16 all the way north into the Meaford area, 14 in Muskoka. Here's a look at the satellite in Cobourg and Kingston. That's where a fog advisory remains. Like Scarborough through Durham region over toward Cobourg and Kingston. That's where a fog advisory remains at this hour. Here's a look at the satellite and radar. It gives you a little bit of an idea of where the fog remains currently. Because
be here, and we are going to be here. You will never divide workers and parents in the province of Ontario. We are going to be here, and we are going to be here long after you are, and we are not giving up.
Gearing up for job action, thousands of education workers will hit the picket lines in the morning, despite the Ford government passing legislation making the strike illegal, imposing a 4-year contract. Good evening. As education workers hit the bricks in the morning, thousands of students will be staying home, with school boards saying they simply cannot keep classrooms open with support workers on strike. CTV's Beth McDonnell is live at Queen's Park tonight, where picket lines will be going up in a matter of hours. Beth.
That's right, Zoraida. CUPE plans to have members here at Queen's Park as of 8 tomorrow morning. They also plan to have members at dozens of locations across the province. This includes Premier Doug Ford's constituency office and Minister of Education Stephen Lecce's constituency office.
We will win! We will win!
Hundreds of parents and supporters rallied in solidarity with CUPE education workers on the verge of not showing up to their jobs in schools across the province.
This government has overstepped enough.
They gathered outside the Sheridan Centre, where talks between the union and government were taking place. Organizers created a makeshift bargaining table with missing politicians. The parents are against the way the Ford government has handled the dispute, from imposing a 4-year contract to using the notwithstanding clause to stop CUPE from taking legal action.
Workers, they're not paid enough, and it's ridiculous that they legislated back to work action. They have a right to strike.
With no deal, workers are heading to picket lines. CUPE tells CTV News the fight education workers have is not with school boards, but with the Ford government, and so they will not be picketing outside schools, choosing constituency offices and Queen's Park instead. But many GTA schools will be closed, including the Toronto District School Board, which says it has no option but to close all schools. Tonight, the Toronto Catholic District School Board says if no members are at work, it's planning to close schools. Peel District School Board students will be learning online. The York Region District School Board says it has no choice but to close schools, while York Catholic District School Board plans to close its schools if all CUPE members don't go to work. The Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board also plans to close schools. The Durham District School Board plans to close schools for in-person learning. Halton District School Board plans to keep elementary schools open on an alternate in-person online schedule. Halton Catholic District School Board will be offering remote learning. It's a situation leaving many parents scrambling.
Means trouble for me. Yeah. I like my children go to school, instead of staying home.
Very horrible, So my wife has to stay home. So if there's a point, or I have to sacrifice.
It is frustrating, but at the same point, I understand the teachers. Being teacher myself, they have their rights to ask for what they want to, right? So we have to support them. And at the same time, it's hard for us as parents.
According to the new law, a strike is illegal tomorrow. As for any recourse, a government source says tonight it will use all tools available to deal with this new law. The bill means members could face a $4,000 fine per day. The union could be fined $500,000 a day. The Ministry of Education has sent out a memo to school boards asking for them to plan to a speedy transition to remote learning. Reporting live at Queen's Park, I'm Beth McDonnell, Zoraida. To school boards asking for them to plan to a speedy transition to remote learning. Reporting live at Queen's Park, I'm Beth McDonnell. Zoraida, back to you.
Thank you, Beth. And it was a dramatic scene inside the legislature today with talks between the union and CUPE. Be breaking off this afternoon, the Ford government passing an historic bill using the notwithstanding clause to block any constitutional challenges. CTV's Queen's Park reporter Siobhan Morris with those details.
CUPE leaders kicked out of Queen's Park as MPPs voted to approve a historic piece of legislation, a bill that imposes a contract on 55,000 educational support workers. The education minister says he had no choice after a mediator called off talks, the parties too far apart.
It's disappointing that we have to get here. All along, we have hoped to reach an agreement that's right for students, that's right for parents, right for workers, and for taxpayers in this province. But CUPE wouldn't budge.
CUPE says it cut its wage request down by more than half, the most their members could tolerate.
To hear today that the minister is concerned about people not being able to eat, children not being able to eat, is a smack in the face to the quarter of my members that are already at food banks.
It means CUPE EAs, custodians, and early childhood educators.
We are on strike.
Until our members decide otherwise.
The union says parents should make alternate arrangements for their kids next week.
We've been very clear that we're going to use every tool at our disposal to get these schools open.
The toolbox includes fines of $500,000 a day for the union, something CUPE says it will fight, but cover if it needs to. There could also be penalties for striking workers.
If the government of Ontario wants to clog up the justice system with $4,000 per member per day fines, then I say bring it on.
The government's using the notwithstanding clause to guard against a constitutional challenge of the bill.
I'm very cognizant of the extraordinary difficulty the strikes and the pandemics of the past 3 years have had on children in Ontario. This is not a normal time in society.
CUPE sees the use of the clause as a galvanizing force for workers.
It impacts every public sector worker, every private sector worker. This is about trade union rights. This is about workers' rights. And that is why you are seeing growing support across the province. They don't know what they have started here.
Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
And we will have much more online, including information on all the closures and what activities may be available tomorrow around the GTA for parents and their families. It's on our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca. And we'll have more news in a moment. First, let's give you a look right now at the special weather plate. Reporting foggy conditions. I have a look right now at downtown Toronto. We're still seeing a little bit of fog there. Pearson Airport also reporting foggy conditions.
That fog the evening, it's become more dense, more widespread with us right through the morning, the afternoon. And Zoraida, that fog in many areas today stuck with us right through the morning, the afternoon, and into the evening. It's become more dense, more widespread in many cases. Through the night tonight, we will continue to see that. Overnight low for us in Toronto is 10 degrees, well above the seasonal average of 3. And once again, tomorrow afternoon, we're looking at a pretty warm day. 18 is what we're forecasting in Toronto. In order for that to happen, we need some of the morning fog to clear out. We're hoping for a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon. Look at Windsor, possibility of 21 for the daytime high, and very mild too in places like Parry Sound and Orillia, close to 20. Speaking of 20 degrees, we have a warm weekend ahead. We'll talk about that coming up in your forecast. For now, back to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. The Ministry of Health published its weekly COVID-19 update this afternoon.
I think overall, all right, guys. So I think overall, we will know more information today of what's going to happen and what will be happening. And they say, right, this is the big thing that we have now realized that we have been live streaming all morning. We'll be on all morning. We realize we'll be on all morning as we've been live all morning on the GTA, around the GTA area.
Okay, it is that time again. We are going to head over to Devo for I Wake Up with BC Business.
Here's the full list. Birthday water. We're now have picket lines here in the people gathering into many in the dense fog, many having gathered now in the dense fog of the early morning. This will be our last update for today, and that really somebody who's watching this. I think whoever is watching this, I hope everybody is okay. Hope I'm not getting any trouble on here in the chat. I have
sector start today, and that means thousands of kids are out of class. But for how long remains to be seen. This after the Ford government legislated a contract for CUPE educational support workers. Here's a live look at Queen's Park this morning, if you can see it through the fog, where at 8 a.m. a massive day-long demonstration is set to take place there. Picket lines are also being staged at PC, MPP, and government offices around the province. 55,000 custodians, early childhood educators, education assistants, and administrative staff are striking after mediation fell apart and the province passed a law imposing wages and making strikes illegal. The union says they will fight the Ford government for as long as it takes, despite facing hefty fines for hitting the picket lines.
We are on strike until this government recognizes that you can put in all of the legislation in place, but you cannot control a worker movement that is so fed up with your overreach. I actually call on Doug Ford to come and talk to me. Stop talking to the media. Don't send Mr. Lecce. Come and speak to me. Let him hear from my members like Charity, who on a call today had to explain to us that she goes to the food bank every Friday to make sure her kids have food.
Beyond what is happening here in relation to the important work our members do in schools, the Ford Conservatives are doing something that is unprecedented in Canadian Labour history. It is just not okay for them to think that they can take the nuclear approach to collective bargaining. That impacts, yes, our members in schools, but it impacts every public sector worker, every private sector worker. This is about trade union rights. This is about workers' rights. And that is why you are seeing growing support across the province. They don't know what they have started here.
Mr. Lecce.
Mr. Lecce.
Mr. McConnell.
Legislation to impose a contract on education workers and ban a strike passed yesterday evening at Queen's Park. MPPs voted as spectators in the public gallery jeered the government. Bill 28 includes the notwithstanding clause, which allows the legislature to override parts of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms for a 5-year term. The bill passed 74-30, with all opposition members voting against it.
This is not a normal time in society. Kids are in a different place. This is not the 90s under the Ray government when there were local strikes, or the Harris government, or the McGuinty government when there were strikes there too. This is a different time. And I would argue most parents would accept the premise. This is an unprecedented challenge on children. And they're seeing the regression in their children's social, emotional, physical, and mental health. And on that basis, we feel strongly that we must do everything available to government to give a voice to children.
Liberal education critic Mitzi Hunter says the government has taken away the rights of education workers.
And the government used its majority to slam this hammer of legislating using the notwithstanding clause for those workers, putting them in a position that if they walk off the job tomorrow, that it would be an illegal strike that will be very costly. It's an abuse of power and heavy-handed and was not needed.
And there you see it. CUPE members and supporters shouted down the government when the bill passed and were removed from the public gallery at Queen's Park. The legislation includes fines of up to $4,000 a day for individuals violating the strike ban and up to $500,000 for the union. CUPE has said it would foot the bill for penalties levied against workers, which could cost as much as $220 million per day.
To grow, how to be a part of a community. Our children's community is crumbling before our eyes.
Meanwhile, CUPE workers and supporters held a rally last night outside of the Sheraton Centre where talks fell apart yesterday. That demonstration included a mock bargaining table that had empty seats for the Premier and Education Minister.
We
The TDSB, who I work for, they did the right thing in shutting down the schools. We can't function without education workers, not at all. It's not safe, it's not effective.
You can take a look at every single person here. We're here because we know who's fighting for our kids, and it's the workers at CUPE who are fighting for more caring adults in the building, more resources and more support for our kids. Those are the people standing up for our kids. Ford and Lecce are attacking them, they're attacking our kids.
And as a result, the Toronto District School Board has confirmed all of its schools will be closed for in-person learning for the duration of the strike. Here's the latest list of school boards that are shut down today. Public and Catholic boards in Toronto, Durham, and York will be closed, as well as the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board. Meantime, the Peel Board says it would have students log in online with teachers and support staff available remotely. If you would like a complete list, you can head to our website, cp24.com. And while most school boards in Ontario are closing schools or offering virtual learning today, a French public school board says kids can come to school for at least today. Conseil Scolaire Viamon's director of education says schools will be open today despite the expected absence of custodians and other support staff. The board says it will make a decision over the weekend about what will happen next week as this situation evolves.
Yeah, so I do want to make it very clear, you guys, that this has actually been a major problem throughout the time. We've been doing practically non-stop coverage of this all morning. Friday morning, this is Friday morning, big deal. That's a really big deal. You can't go to school, you can't see your friends for a while. A lot of people are probably now knowing this uncertainty has now put uncertainty now put on the families and stuff, and now I need to look for alternative care. So I'm gonna pop off here. So that's probably I think that's probably it for my part. I probably will wrap it up here and there, or at least until we get further development from the board. We'll come back tomorrow with day 2, and this is when we'll read the official statement from the board. Yesterday we read the official statement from the board. They did release another statement yesterday. Apparently, they will be offering remotely. We will be moving our services remotely. Wondering how will SAC be moving remotely. All right. Here we go. Dear parents and guardians, as a follow-up to our message earlier today, UP has now confirmed that they will be on strike on Friday, November 4th, 2022. Because of the negotiation agreement has not been reached with the government of Ontario. Given the confirmation that CUPE is on strike, all DDSB schools will be closed for in-person learning starting on Friday and for the duration of the strike action to protect the health and safety of students. Please do not send your children to school. At this stage, we do not know how long this labor disruption will last. We will provide families with an update tomorrow on our plan to support students learning for next week. If the strike continues and schools remain closed to in-person learning as the result, as a reminder for Friday, educators will be providing students with independent work to complete through your child's Google Classroom or other digital platforms. There will be no live virtual classroom instruction for students on Friday. For the latest information, please continue to visit DBSB.ca and follow DBSB on Twitter. So this was the official statement from yesterday. So there will be things like community use of school are now also closed. We have been, in fact, we are shut down essentially. We are not going to school today. but cleared up a little bit. You want to make confirmations on the fog. It's a big deal. Like, this is a very big deal. Like 2 hours. Like, yeah. So I'm gonna hop off now, and I'll be checking back in every day tomorrow, 8 to every day. Either that or well, I'm not gonna start until we actually have. So you have to finally have people do have a right to work, but you need to realize that you can't just trample people's rights over things. And you guys, I'm not gonna lie when I say this. And you know, I'm not even kidding. A lot of my friends have said that if you do violate your rights, you should risk. This is a violation of your rights. You can't just trample people's rights over school. So that is a confirmation that has been happening over the last couple of months or the last couple of years. It's just the concept that I have to deal with.
Kids in hockey, it's amazing how much that costs. If I'm going to put a child in a tennis program, what would that cost? Yeah, if you're going to put a 7-week program, costs about $20 an hour, $20 an hour. So you're paying about $145 for a 7-week program. Any tips for parents?
Yesterday, actually, didn't quite get more talk about fog. We actually have more photos of fog. We actually took some photos of fog last night and then early this morning, and also the beginning of the day. So I'm gonna hop off now. So see you guys later at Traveling Robert's live stream. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye.